Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. Today is July 7th, 2018. It is Saturday night. And tonight we're going to be talking about when the United States Mint used more than half a billion ounces of silver. And the U.S. Mint used more than half a billion ounces of silver. We're going to talk about that, but first, let's take a look what happened during the day. Well, Korea had an announcement, and so did the United States, and they seem to have had different understandings of their meetings between Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who thought the meeting went well with North Korea, and North Korea thought that the United States had acted like, quote, gangsters, and it was a regrettable meeting. So we'll see how that goes. That's all I know at the moment. Also on Monday, Donald Trump will pick, it looks like from among three Supreme Court picks, Brett Kavanaugh, Raymond Kethridge, and Amy Coney Barrett. All three of them will probably pose issues for the Democrats. Brett Kavanaugh poses the biggest issue for the conservatives because apparently he had given some rationale both to the Congress and to the Supreme Court Justice Roberts on how to make Obamacare legal. Also, apparently, he was somehow involved with the Clintons and the Vince Foster case, so there is a supposed whisper campaign against him. The other guy, Raymond Kethridge, they're calling, I think I have his name right, they're calling him Gorsuch 2.0, so I would imagine that he's probably in a pole position ahead of Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett might make sense because she's a woman, but she has very, very strong views on abortion that she has talked about, and that may make her harder to confirm. You just may get one person, maybe Collins from Maine or some Republican who would vote against her on that basis. So I'm going to go with, I'll probably pick this Raymond Kethridge guy, although second choice would be Amy Coney Barrett, if indeed these are the three. And I would imagine that Brett Kavanaugh shouldn't have a chance with Trump if those points that I made were indeed factual. Also, I learned today that Paul Manafort is in solitary confinement. That has a lot of people upset, given that, he may have broken his terms of bail. They have him in solitary confinement, which in a sense is, for many say, is torture, although they're saying that the reason he is in solitary confinement, of course, is for his own benefit because they can't guarantee safety. All right. Now, before we get started on the topic of this evening, when the U.S. Mint used more than half a billion ounces of silver, I just want to remind you of the ups and downs of the amounts of silver that the U.S. Mint has used when it used to make coins 90% silver. If you go back to a few evenings ago when we discussed when the U.S. confiscated silver, we learned that that confiscation was due to a silver shortage that had been artificially created because the United States melted down Morgan silver dollars to ship to India to solve a silver shortage that England had, and they needed to send them to England because England had India as a colony, and it was responsible for minting the coins over there, the rupee silver coins. So the United States melted down a large number of Morgan silver dollars, and with the understanding that they would then remint them pursuant to the Pittman Act of 1918. And they did indeed start that reminting process in 1921. However, the silver that they were using, nearly all of it went to minting silver dollars, and they didn't mint enough dimes, quarters, and half dollars during the 1930s. So by 1934, they needed to get more silver under the Silver Purchase Act of 1934, and also if they can confiscate it from the citizens in order to mint more coins. All right, but what happened now? What was the year when the United States Mint used more than half a billion dollars of silver? I keep saying $500 million. It's not $500 million. It was when the U.S. Mint used more than $500 million ounces of silver. And that year was 1964. Also, they used part of that silver hoard in 1965 because the coins dated 1964 were minted all during 1964 and partially through 1965, and I will explain why they continued minting silver dimes, quarters, and half dollars in 1965, but were dating them 1964. So the total amount used was almost 550 million ounces of silver were used at the U.S. Mint. Now put that into some type of perspective. The exact number is 549,549,066 ounces were used to make dimes, quarters, and half dollars. 90% silver, dimes, quarters, and half dollar, what today we call, quote, junk silver. And those coins were minted for everyday use. They were not to be sold. They were just to be put into circulation so people could use them as currency. Dimes, quarters, half dollars made of 90% silver. And the total face value of those coins were $759 billion. That was $228 billion in dimes, $316 billion in quarters, and $214 billion in half dollars. So the U.S. Mint value, the face value, was almost $1 trillion of those coins. They were 90% silver. Now the value of that silver today would probably be, I don't know, about $10 billion, because if you take your 549 million, and I guess today we're at what, $16 an ounce, so you probably get somewhere about $870 billion. But it's a large amount of silver that was used just to mint everyday coins, and that 550 million ounces is approximately 2/3 of today's annual silver mining production. Now, why did they mint so many coins dated 1964? Because in 1963, they had minted far less. It looked like they were minting the normal amount that they needed to. But in 1964, they ramped up production. And the reason is that was to be the last year that the United States would ever mint coins with silver in them, 90%. Now, they did continue to make the half dollar, the Kennedy half dollar, from 1965 to 1969 in 40% silver. But 1964 dated coins are the last year that the U.S. Mint made 90% silver coins for general circulation. Now compare that to 2015, when the U.S. Mint set a record 47 million 1-ounce American silver eagles. Well, that's nothing compared to the 550 million ounces of silver that were used just for everyday coins. And indeed, if you look at silver eagles were first minted in 1986. And from 1986 to 2016, in 30 years, the U.S. Mint made 577 million of them. So basically, they sold over 30 years about the same amount of silver that the U.S. Mint used just to basically hand out to people to use as coinage in 1964. So you get an idea that this was a very big year for silver, and this was a long time coming. They didn't just decide in 1964 they were going to drop silver from the coinage. It would have been inconceivable to even think about that. Think about in 1934, go back to when the United States confiscated silver, they went to extreme efforts to get silver so that they can mint coins, just like England went through great efforts to get silver coins for India. In the 30s, there was no way, shape, or form they would ever think that they could get away with just restamping the coins with numbers on them and saying they're as good as the old coins. So the United States in 1934, having confiscated gold in 1933 to take it out of the monetary system, there was no such desire to do that in 1934. The reason they confiscated the silver was to basically mint it and give it back to the people. But by 1964, they wanted to demonetize silver. Let's go to John Kennedy in January 21st, 1963. An economic report to Congress. This is John F. Kennedy speaking. I again urge a revision in our silver policy to reflect the status of silver as a metal for which there is an expanding industrial demand. Except for its use in coins, silver serves no monetary function. Now, I think what he's saying there is silver is an industrial metal. Now, this is the first Democrat since the Democrats forever were the party of silver. Kennedy broke from tradition and basically said, no, we don't want silver to be part of the monetary system. It's too important in industry, and they wanted to use it for industry. He also urged them to stop the minting or the producing of the silver certificates and having silver to back those. He urged using that for industry, the strategic stockpiles, also they wanted to get rid of. Now, when Lyndon Johnson became president, he then carried on and carried through with this demonetization of silver, but they decided they were going to make one last hurrah, and they were going to mint these 550 million ounces of silver into dimes, quarters, and half dollars. Now let's look at what Lyndon Johnson said in 1965 in July. Now remember, they were still minting 1964 dated coins well into 1965. They probably had stopped by July. So let me read you part of what Lyndon Johnson said to Congress on July 23rd, 1965. Well, I probably shouldn't try to do a Lyndon Johnson accent. We are gathered here today. Anyway, we're gathered here today for a very rare and historic occasion in our nation's history. When I have signed this bill before me, we will have made the first fundamental change in our coinage in 173 years. The Coinage Act of 1965 supersedes the Act of 1792, and that act had the title An Act Establishing a Mint and Regulating the Coinage of the United States. Since that time of our coinage, dimes and quarters and half dollars and dollars have contained 90% silver. Today, except for the silver dollar, we are establishing new coinage to take its place beside the old. Just a quick footnote, they had stopped making U.S. Mint had stopped making silver dollars in 1935. They were thinking about, in 1964, issuing a 1964 silver dollar made of 90% silver, but they did not do so. But the idea was that they would use the peace dollar that was discontinued in 1935 after, if you remember our prior YouTube, when the U.S. confiscated silver. Pursuant to the Pittman Act, they made those silver dollars from 1921 to 1935 almost to the number to replace the Morgan silver dollars that had been melted down to send the silver to India so they can ship it to India, England to send it to India. Then he says, my Secretary of Treasury, Joe Fowler, is a little stingy about making samples, but I have some here. Joe made sure I wouldn't put them in my pocket by sending them over here in plastic. Okay, so now he has these fake coins with him, and he says the new dimes and new quarters will contain no silver. They will be composites with faces and the same alloy used in our 5-cent piece that is bonded to a core of pure copper. They will show a copper edge. For those who don't know, the American or U.S. Mint nickel is made of 75% copper and 25% nickel. And it is still 75% copper and 25% nickel, has been all along. What the dime, quarter, and half dollar were, or still are, the dime and the quarter, they don't make the half dollar anymore for circulation. They're still legal tender, but they only make them for collectors since, I think, 2000. But the dime and the quarter that you see in circulation have that shiny finish, and that's the 75-25 copper nickel outer part of the coin, but the core is pure copper, so it's 100% copper. So a dime and a quarter are not 75% copper, 25% nickel. They're even less nickel because the core is 100% copper, whereas a nickel does contain 25% nickel throughout. Just an aside there. Then he says, our new half dollar will continue in our silver tradition. 80% silver on the outside and 19% silver inside. That's the 40% coin they were introducing in 1965, the 40% silver half dollar that they minted from 1965 to 1969. It will be nearly indistinguishable in appearance from our present half dollar. All these new coins will be the same size and will bear the same designs as do their present counterparts. They will fit in all parking meters and all the coin machines. We will have the same monetary value as the present ones. He's trying to get across the point. Just because there's not 90% silver in a dime or a quarter, just because the 1965 half dollar will have 40% silver instead of 90%, doesn't matter. They're marked as such, and that's the value they'll have, and they'll work in all the machines. Then he says, echoing John Kennedy. Remember, John Kennedy said that silver serves, except for its use in coin, no useful monetary function. Well, now Johnson is saying silver doesn't even serve a coin function, because he says, all of you know these changes are necessary for a very simple reason. Silver is scarce material. Our uses of silver are growing as our population and economy grows. The hard fact is that silver consumption is now more than double new silver production each year. So they were dipping into strategic reserves. Remember, when Nixon closed the gold window, it was the same thing. The foreign central banks, France, Switzerland, Germany, were coming to the U.S. as they were allowed to do under the Bretton Woods Agreement and redeeming the dollars for gold. They were concerned here that not so much that people were redeeming their silver certificates, which they allowed you to redeem until 1968, and you would get silver dollars for them, but that basically the use of silver and coins was taking away from the ability to use that newly mined silver and use it for industry. So he says, in the face of this worldwide shortage of silver and our rapidly growing need for coins, the only really prudent course was to reduce our dependence upon silver for making our coins. If we had not done so, we would have risked chronic coin shortages in the near future. And then he says there's no change in the penny or the nickel. There's no change in the silver dollar because they weren't making them. And he says, although we have no present plans for silver dollar production. So they never made the silver dollar again until the Eisenhower silver dollar, which wasn't silver. It was just like the same material as the dime, the quarter, and the half dollar, which they made in 1971 to about 78 or 9. And then they started making those little Susan B. Anthony dollars that they were called the Carter quarters because they were small between 1979 and 1981. Now, some have asked whether our silver coins will disappear, says Johnson. The answer is very definitely no. Our present silver coins won't disappear, and they won't even become rarities. Famous last words. We estimate now there are 12 billion, I repeat, more than 12 billion silver dimes and quarters and half dollars that are now outstanding. We will make another billion before we halt production, and they will be used side by side with our new coins. Now, what I find interesting here, he just said that silver is rare. The consumption is skyrocketing. They're using more than double the new silver production. They need it. But yet they're blowing an enormous amount of silver in 1964 to make these coins. And I guess here's why. He's trying to make a point. He's saying they'll use side by side with our coins. They're anticipating that people are going to indeed save and hoard these coins. So he says, our present silver coins won't disappear. They won't even become rarities. And then he says we've got 12 billion outstanding. I repeat, more than 12 billion. And he's basically pointing out that there's 12 billion, and they just minted almost another billion. The 12 billion had been minted over the past 15, 20 years. And he says, since the life of a silver coin is about 25 years, we expect our traditional silver coins to be with us in large numbers for a long, long time. We're counting on people pulling them out of circulation. They're almost all gone in a year. Then he says, if anybody has any idea of hoarding our silver coins, let me say this. Here's the threat. Treasury has a lot of silver on hand, and it can be and it will be used to keep the price of silver in line with its value in our present silver coin. There will be no profit in holding them out of circulation for the value of their silver content. Repeat, Treasury has a lot of silver on hand, and it can be and it will be used to keep the price of silver in line with its value in our present silver coin. So they knew people were going to try to hoard them, and that's why they minted 5 times the amount that they probably normally would have minted, just to make them look so plentiful and to try to say, look, they're side by side, there's no difference. Every time you get change, you'll get a half, you might get some silver, you might get some non-silver. What's the difference? No point in hoarding them because the Treasury's got a lot of silver and it'll use it to manipulate the price down. The problem with this is anyone's paying attention. He just said there's a silver shortage. He just said that we need it for industry. So the fact that they minted all these coins to try to prevent people from hoarding them, all they did was give a gift to people who were going to hoard them, because in 1965 there were plenty of them for you to hoard out of existence if you were paying attention. And a lot of people did that. Then he says the new coins are not going to have any scarcity value either. Now that's true. There's no numismatic value on a 1964 quarter, 1964 Kennedy half, 1964 dime, or quarter. The mint is geared to get into production quickly and do it on a massive scale. We expect to produce not less than 3.5 billion of the new coins in the next year, and if necessary, twice that amount in the following 12 months. So we've come here this morning, the first house of the land in this beautiful rose garden, to congratulate all those men and women who make up our fine Congress who made this legislation possible, committees of both houses, the leadership in both houses, both parties, Secretary Fowler, and all his associates in the Treasury. And then he says, I commend the new coinage to the nation's banks and businesses and to the public. I think it will serve us well. And then he signs it, thanks everybody, and he says we're going to keep our eyes on the stars and our feet on the ground. So there you have it. That is the story behind when the U.S. Mint used 550 million ounces of silver to mint 90% silver coins in dimes, quarters, and half-dollar form just for general circulation. And there was a warning not to hoard them because the Treasury would release its strategic stockpile to keep the price down. People hoarded them anyway. The only thing Johnson was right about is those coins really have no numismatic value, but they do still have a 90% value. All right, let's see who we have with us tonight and what the comments are. All right, Gusta Broken. Off topic, it's hard to understand how a cemetery raised its burial cost and blamed it on the cost of living. Ha-ha. Nothing is foolproof to a sufficiently talented fool. Oh, Gus has got the drums, the boom. He's got the stand-up lines here. Talk is cheap because supply exceeds demand. Change is inevitable except from a vending machine. Okay. Poppy stuff. Pennies are no longer worth 1 red cent. I think Yogi Berra said a nickel isn't worth a dime anymore. Skywatch is here. Hi, y'all. Gus the Broken. A careful study of economics usually reveals the best time to buy anything is last year. That's got a lot of them. Doc of the Bay. Keep telling it like it is. Oh, we interrupt this program to let you know that the Smaulgld Classic Mug and Smaulgld Super Classic mugs are now available. And there's a picture of one on your screen. And if you go to, I'm going to give you the thing right now. If you just go to Smaulgld.com, you could, or I can hear them, they're clinking on my desk here. If you go to Smaulgld.com, someone might be the first one to order one of these fine mugs for, let's just see here, to order your shipping is included. Now, these mugs are very fine. They'll even look better than the ones you have in the picture. They're 11-ounce mugs, and when you're listening to your Smaulgld and you want to maybe play a drinking game, every time I say game changer, well, there's your Smaulgld mug right in front of you, and you can pound it down. They're good for drinking just about anything. It's good for coffee. And you can get 2 of them. One when one's in the wash, you'll never be without your Smaulgld mug. Let's see if I've got any sales whatsoever. I will be notified if anyone buys one tonight. And then these I'm going to ship out myself with a personal note. If anyone orders today, I'll ship them out Monday. All right, let's get back to the comments. I wish I started stacking 10 years ago. Well, if you started stacking silver 10 years ago, you'd be right back where you started, which wouldn't be bad, but the price of silver is about the same price as it was in 2008. Gusta Broken. A parking meter is a device that enables you to do 2 hours shopping in one. All right? You got to get Gus a microphone here. Let's see, what is the 50-50-90 rule? Anytime you have a 50-50 chance of getting something right, there's a 90% probability you'll get it wrong. Okay. Dock of the Bay. Hold silver no matter what. All right. Skywatch Central. What about gold? Is it not also good to have some gold? Depends on what you have it for. My opinion, again, not investment advice, is if you're going to hold something to hold value, historically, gold holds more value than silver. If you're going to buy something because you think there might be some speculative value, silver is the one because it has industrial use and shortages might drive the price up, but it also has that bit of monetary value. But silver is riskier. If you look at long-term charts of gold and silver, gold stays more steady when it goes up. Sometimes silver goes up much more, but silver has periods where it gets absolutely clobbered. And gold, I think, has a floor on it because central banks still hold it. No matter what anyone tells you, the amount that's available to buy is less than silver. And gold historically, outside the United States, is revered in India, in China. It's not, the silver stackers are an American phenomenon. They're not, silver is not as revered around the world, and therefore I don't think it has the same premium that gold has. And you think about jewelry, engagement rings, they're not silver, they're gold. All right. Gusta Broken. Everyone has a photographic memory. Some just don't have film. I'm full of jokes tonight. That you are, Gusta Broken. My delivery of your jokes isn't very good, though. I don't know if people are laughing. Dock of the Bay. Johnson was so wrong that he died young from stress. Yeah, he was a very odd man. There's a book, if you're interested in learning about, not Andrew Johnson, Lyndon Johnson. Robert Caro, who wrote a multi-series book on, the one I'm interested in is The Path to Power, is how he became a big-time politician and eventually wormed his way into the Kennedy ticket in 1964. That was a year where they decided that Kennedy was a liberal, they thought. Well, he was kind of a liberal. He was a Democrat liberal Northeasterner, and they needed a conservative Southerner to balance the ticket. Oddly enough, Lyndon Johnson, the conservative Southerner, is the one who gave us the entire new Medicare, Medicaid system in 1965 as part of the Great Society. He's also the one who ramped up the Vietnam War. So Johnson was in the 20th century even more so, or equal to FDR in terms of running a welfare warfare state. Roosevelt, one could argue, did not prompt World War II, although there's signs that he allowed Japanese to bomb Pearl Harbor so the U.S. can get into World War II. So both Johnson and FDR, and Johnson, of course, invented Social Security, but he presided over the introduction of Social Security, big government spending, government work projects, new government agencies, and Johnson was in the same vein. Now, the Vietnam War, you could say the same thing. It was prompted by the Gulf of Tonkin attack, and then they had the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. So both presidents spent a lot of money, both on the welfare, warfare, guns, and butter programs. What if the silver-gold ratio went back to 15-1? That would be nice. Well, Skywatch Central, I've covered this a lot. It has only been at 16-1, like for 15 minutes in the past 100 years. And that was in 1980 when the Hunt brothers were going at it and trying to get as much silver as they could. Generally, in the past 40 years, since you got to remember, since before 1974, all the way back to 1934, the price of gold was set by an act of Congress, the Gold Act of 1934, at $35 an ounce. Even during that period, the gold-silver ratio never fell, but the price of gold was not artificially suppressed, was suppressed by law. Well, it's artificial, but I mean, it wasn't in hiding or anything, and the price of gold was stuck at $35. Ever since they've allowed gold to float somewhat, since 1974, the gold-silver ratio, especially the last 40 years, since the Hunt brothers, has averaged about 55, 60 to 1. So that shows that when the two are allowed to float, both subject to manipulation, both subject to the same market forces, that the gold-silver ratio doesn't go down that much. In fact, the lowest it went was in 2011. It went to 30 to 1 when silver rose back to $50 an ounce and gold was heading towards 1900. And you do get that period of time when gold takes off, silver will take off more, and then you will get a drop in the gold-silver ratio. But the last 5 years, everyone's been yelling and screaming, gold-silver ratio's got to come down. There's rare silver, the natural ratio is 16 to 1. I actually believe that's nonsense, that there's no such thing as a natural ratio. Relative rarity does not determine price. And all you have to do is look at platinum right now. Platinum is far more rare than gold, and gold is 1.5 times more expensive. So when people talk about silver, it's not the same metal. It's not used by central banks. It's got 70% industrial use. It's a smaller market. Just because it's 16 times or whatever your number you come up with more plentiful doesn't mean that's what the value of it should be. And when people tell you it has to get to that ratio because that's natural, that's not true at all. Another just a quick example I give is my artwork is thousands of times rarer than Picasso's. He made thousands of paintings. I made 3 and they all suck. But I can't argue that my paintings are more valuable because they're rarer than Picasso's. Now, I'm not saying silver sucks. I'm just saying it's not gold. And so just because it's rarer or it's relatively only 16 times as plentiful doesn't mean that the price should be 16 times. All right. DNA sounds like another version of when the Romans used to shave coins. You know, I'm going to do a report on that. I have a full report. Don't go check in my archives, but we'll cover it one night on the entire debasement of the Roman denarius DNA. We can cover that. Oh, I thought somebody ordered a mug. I see it's my own comment. To order your mug, go to Smaulgld.com. Poppy stuff. Very interesting topic on the last year's silver production. I thought that was very interesting. What I thought was interesting was they were claiming there was some type of big shortage, which I'm sure there was, and industrial, we can't waste it on coins, and then he blows it on 500. He blows 550 million ounces of silver, thinking that he's going to manipulate the price. All right, Hubzilla. So what is causing? Okay, let's see. What is causing the backlog of production Class 8 trucks? Some say shortage of electronic components, but no mention of silver. I don't think today there's a silver shortage. So I don't know. You know, when there was it was 2015, and there was a silver eagle shortage, and there was. That's not the same as a silver shortage. It just meant that the U.S. Mint underestimated how many people would be buying silver eagles that year, so they didn't order enough blanks, silver planchets, to stamp the eagle on from their private companies that they get them from. One of them's Sunshine Minting. So if you have a hamburger shortage at a picnic, it doesn't mean there's a beef shortage. It just means you haven't made them into hamburgers, most likely. I mean, if you have the beef, but you haven't bashed them into patties, you have a hamburger shortage, not a beef shortage. From one mug to the other. That's what the card said on my coffee mug gift. I say get mugged by Smaulgld. Get one of those mugs. All right. 18 years ago, gold was only $250 an ounce. That's right. Smaulgld. The next time silver explodes in value, it's going to be a new record. Well, that's what happens. Silver has these spikes, these dramatic spikes, and it's probably due for one in the next 5 or 10 years, since we've only had 2 major spikes since 1980, and then 2011, that was 31 years, so maybe by 2040, 2041, we'll get another of those big spikes. Gus the Broken, I sold 20 kilograms of silver today, so I'm full of smiles. All right. Ben Cusimano. Good stuff. Thank you. Grazie. Gus, with alternatives like stocks, bonds, real estate so risky right now, may just as well have sat on it for a while. Skywatch Central. Yeah, you're right. Gold is quite a bit rarer than silver. Platinum is actually a bit less rare than gold in the earth. That's right. And in fact, there's a lot of platinum in the ground. Above ground, they only mine, 10 times less platinum than they do gold. But there are a lot of platinum reserves. But that does tell you that the demand for platinum isn't there if they don't mine it, and that's why the price is down. And it gets a lot more complicated than just how much gold is there, how much silver is there above ground, how much gold is there, how much silver is there in reserves. It's really how much do people actually want it. And then, even if it comes down to, let's say, the silver numbers favor the price going up, and let's say there's manipulation and they don't want it to go up, silver is tremendously more easy to manipulate than gold because it's a small market. So I don't look at the gold-silver ratio and say it's some kind of slam dunk that it's going to go down. I've been saying for 5 years it's not, and it hasn't. It's gone from 55 to 82. I remember 2 or 3 years ago people yelling at me, you don't know what you're talking about, 16 to 1, because they listen to these other channels and they just repeat the same thing, that silver is rarer than gold, or silver should be 1 to 1, or silver should be 16 to 1, the natural ratio. They don't look at the history of the gold-silver ratio. They just listen to what they hear on these channels. All right. It's only been mined recently in history as opposed to gold, which is mined since ancient time. That's right, Skywatch. The platinum has only really been mined since the late 19th century when it was discovered in Russia. They even made Russian platinum coins for a small amount of time, so it has a small monetary history. Then they found some in South Africa. I think the third largest place is the U.S. But now they're finding out that platinum is going to be used less because diesel is going out and they use them for catalytic converters. And the other demand for platinum was the Japanese took a real shine to it for jewelry. Now, if you ever look at platinum, it's not even as nice looking as silver. Silver is better looking, except it tarnishes. But platinum is very dense. It's even more dense than gold. So it's a very unique element. It's got a lot of great properties, but and it's very rare, and it's not mined. And when South Africa goes on these strikes, there could be a supply deficit. But so far, platinum has gone down. And look at palladium. It's outpaced platinum. And platinum used to be half the price, and now it's more expensive than platinum. Thank you, Skywatch. Dock of the Bay, good point. Silver is not gold. Silver is more useful. Yes, and copper is very useful too. See, when people use the silver is so useful argument, you can say that about tin, aluminum, copper, all of these metals are very useful. The question is, how much silver do you need? And one of the things people don't realize is, well, it's used on electronics. Electronics in 2010, I think, used 310 million ounces. And by 2017, it was only 230 million ounces. They find ways, electronics get smaller, they use less silver. Same with solar panels. While solar panels have doubled in production over the last 10 years, the amount of silver used is not. Again, because they figure out ways to use less silver. So people who just extrapolate numbers out and tell you silver is so useful, it's going to have exploding uses. They find uses for it every day. Those are generalities. You need to get into the specifics. How much silver is there going to be in a yoga pants? Not very much. So you have to look at the numbers behind these uses, and it's not really that explosive. And if the demand for investment silver goes down, as it has 80% in the past 3 years since 2015, well, that clears up more silver for an industry. So I don't know. I'm not predicting one way or the other silver goes up or down, but you hear the silver promoters make it sound like every year silver is a slam dunk. I've seen videos on it for the last 5 years. Silver is going to go to 50, and it doesn't go. And you have to ask yourself why. And it's not just manipulation. Obviously, there's manipulation, but there are a lot of fundamental reasons that no one tells you about because no one wants to hear it, because most of these channels are in the business of giving you a story, either to sell a newsletter or to sell you silver. And the problem is then people hear these. There's where most of the visitors, most of the traffic goes to these channels, and then they just repeat the same stuff. And everybody's repeating, thinking that that's going to make it true, and it hasn't happened. There's a reason. I sold my colleague silversmith as I had lots doing nothing at my shop. At the end of the day, gold is the goal. Silver is a mean achieving the goal. Well, that's what some people are doing in Skywatch. They're hoping that when the silver-gold ratio goes down, they'll swap that out, put into gold, and then hold on to that. That's not a bad strategy, I'd imagine. Okay, DNA database. Weren't the Spanish pretty into mining and using silver centuries ago? Yes. Do you know the percentage they use gold versus silver? Well, I know historically almost all civilizations use silver over gold, other than, and I had started a blog post, a long blog post on this. I think it was the Byzantine Empire. I think they used a gold coin in transaction. I forgot the name of it, but I was doing it. But most civilizations used some form of silver. So you had the pieces of 8, which was almost a global currency that the Spanish minted, and they even minted them in Mexico based on the silver that was available in South America. And even the United States, they used the pieces of 8 because it was a unit of silver. The Romans used the denarius. All through Europe, silver coins were used up till about 1965, 66, 67, 68. French had silver coins. Italy, England, shillings. Some of them were 45% silver in England. Canada had 80% silver coinage until 1968, I believe. Indians had silver rupees. China had silver coins. Yeah, silver was used as the means of exchange far more than gold was. Database DNA compared gold to platinum up there. Yep. But yes, the Spanish are all about that silver. You know, the Spanish created, they say, inflation in Spain when they brought back all that silver from the New World. Why? They increased the money supply. They brought back all that silver, and silver became plentiful in Spain, and there was more money chasing. There was more money available, and that drove down the value of the money. Hubzilla 15K, that is okay. I was asking Luis. Soy Luis. Yo no soy Luis. Soy Luigi. Sono italiano, no spagnolo. I'm saying that my name is not Luis. My name is Luigi, or Louis, or Jose. But not Luis, not Louis. Alright. I think he said something about U.S. only caring about silver coins. I don't know what we're talking about there, but in 1964, I know what I was saying. I was saying that I think starting in 2008, after the financial crisis, with the advent of silver doctors and Mike Maloney, and there was a lot of interest created on the internet in the United States of people getting into silver. That is, I've had interviews with people in foreign countries, from India, from China, Bulgaria. Silver does not have any cachet value around the world. A lot of people in America have been browbeated into this silver. Chris Dwayne, there's a lot of American silver promotion that really only started in the last 10 years, promoting silver. If you even go back and look at the silver eagle numbers compared to the gold eagle numbers, at one point in 1999, when they were worried about Y2K, they almost sold 1 ounce of gold to 1 ounce of silver. The silver was not considered something that people would buy for security. It was the gold people wanted in Y2K. If you look at the silver, if you look at the U.S. Mint numbers, it wasn't until 2008 that the U.S. Mint started consistently selling well over 10, 20, 30, 40 million ounces. Before that, you would sell 3 or 4 million ounces of gold eagles, and you would sell 5 or 6 in the silver. The ratio of the amount of silver sold to gold wasn't very high. It wasn't until, as I mentioned, after the financial crisis, a lot of people caught on to silver, and I do attribute that a lot to the very popular YouTube channels Silver Fortune, not Silver Fortune, wasn't around then. The Chris Jane channel, Truth Never Told, Mike Maloney, Silver Doctors, where there was a promotion of silver and awareness of silver that drove the silver demand. But overseas, that silver demand doesn't exist in Europe, especially because they've got 20% VAT on it. So it doesn't make sense to buy silver the way it does in the U.S. So what I was saying is that the U.S. is more silver-centric, and that may have stopped because since 2015, silver investment demand, U.S. mint demand is down 80%. People aren't buying the Silver Eagles, the Canadian silver maple leafs, the way they once were. So I can leave 10 pounds of silver on my front porch and no one take whatever, one shiny gold, it will be gone fast. That's probably true. But if you left it beside a chocolate bar, they forget both the gold and silver. That's right, Mark Dice. How come no one talks about the blank to copper ratio? Gold, silver is a bad comparison because supply and demand are different reach. That's right, they're different markets. Silver is more akin to copper, and if you think about the prices of precious metals, silver is closer to the prices of copper, tin, and aluminum than it is to gold, platinum, and palladium. It's not even in the same league in terms of pricing. Plan on owning some of each, says Skyrock. Doc of the Bay, great info. Thank you, Smaulgld. Thank you for listening, Doc of the Bay. All right. When oil goes to 250, you're going to have some nice inflation then. Yes, of course. Database. Central banks aren't fans of anything they can't easily inflate, like when the Spanish brought back all their silver. They can't do that anymore. Right. But silver is the next best bet. I think a lot of people look at silver as what is it called? Poor man's gold. And people say, well, I can't afford gold. I've never understood that because it's just simple math. And I guess people feel more comfortable having, I don't know, six ounces of silver instead of 1/10 of an ounce of gold. It's the same thing. It costs you the same amount. You don't get much, but the point is, if you had bought 1/10 of an ounce of gold 6 years ago and you bought your 6 silver coins, you would have lost money on the silver. And the spread between gold and silver over the last 5 years is 25-30%. Your gold would have gone up a bit and you would have lost 25% on your silver. So I'm not sure. I don't buy the argument that you're too poor to buy gold. You just can't buy much of it. And I guess people think if they can buy a lot of something, that makes it more worthwhile. Not necessarily true. And again, do you buy 10 paintings by a minor artist or do you buy one Picasso? You can use all types of examples. Silver's cheap for a reason. It was pocket change at one point. Think about that. It was pocket change. Johnson just decided he was going to mint, with the Treasury, 550 million ounces of silver one year. And then he was going to flood the market if people try to hoard them. Just let that sink in. That shows that silver, they would never do that with gold. They couldn't do that with gold. All right. It would be nice if copper bullion were... Yes, Skywatch, that's a great point. The thing about copper bullion, you ever look at the prices, they charge you like 4 times the price to mint it. If you want to collect copper, I'm not advising you to do this, but get the pre-1982 pennies. They're all copper. It'll take you a long time to pick through them, and then you're going to have, pounds and pounds of them. I mean, copper is cheap still, but that's how you get copper. I think there's 2 cents worth of copper, even at today's prices, in a pre-1982 penny. Some people that buy silver buying for barter, easy with multiple coins. I've always questioned that too, because how are you going to convince somebody when you have a quarter and there's a barter situation? They're going to say, okay, thanks for the quarter. You're going to say, no, it's worth $4 or $5. And they're going to say, no, it's not. It's worth a quarter. They say, no, but look, it says 1964 on it. And they're going to say, I don't care if it says 1928. Well, what does that mean to me? Most people are not aware that the coins are 90% silver. And they're not aware what the value of silver is for barter. So having and they're not even going to know how do you value a dime? Like, how much is a silver dime worth? I mean, I know how much it's worth. I could do the calculation, but most people aren't going to be able to figure out. Because first of all, if you look at the dime, quarter, and half dollar, they're not even based on any type of, what's the word? base 10 system. So, for example, the quarter has 0.18084 or something like that ounces of silver. What does that mean? You have a quarter and it's like 0.18. How can you even calculate that easily? How much is in a dime? When you say, well, this dime has I don't know how much is in a dime. You say there's, I don't know, say 2 grams or something. How can you calculate how much a dime is? See, if a dime was 1/10 of an ounce, you'd say, okay, well that's pretty easy to do. But a dime it's like 0.07 or something. 0.0, and then it's like 0.07234. Whatever, they're really weird numbers. So if you're gonna barter with that, then you're gonna have someone put them on a scale. They're gonna be worn. They're not even gonna weigh what they used to weigh when they were minted. I don't know. The barter idea never made much sense to me. I would think it might make sense just to have rounds maybe that have stamped on them how much silver is, but then you have to know what the price of silver is. So I don't know. All right, let's see what else we got here before we call it a night. Oh, look at this. We got a lot here. We have to come up with a new comment. I mean, maybe Gus, you're going to have to send the jokes to me in advance. Let's see. Salivate Metal just sold at a stack, 1,500 silver. He has a lot of stuff there. Yeah. I like the feel of a 1 ounce silver bar in my hand. Plus, you can knock someone out with it. You kill, yeah, really. I mean, that's 100 ounces. Very, very heavy. All right. H. Zillis. Careful. Some, like Hill Group and Steve said, Angelo at SRS Rocker argued demand destruction will cause collapse of oil demand. The economy tanks fast. Oil leaving paradoxical oversupply. Steve had some very interesting theories on oil, and I had him on a couple of weeks ago. We'll have him back on to talk about. He is not a believer in this shale oil stuff. Not at all. He doesn't believe that the mines will last and that they're even profitable at the way they're producing it. All right. I couldn't agree more. Pre-65 coins are a bad idea for SHT situation. I just think they're unwieldy. I mean, they look good, but the idea is convincing somebody else that it's not a quarter, that it's worth more than a quarter, and it's not a dime, and you can't do the calculation. You saw me, I was struggling. How much was in a dime? 0.0. So, yeah, that's it. How much was in a quarter? 0.1814. It's very hard to figure that stuff out. All right, I think we're going to call it a night. Let's see here. All right, yep. I think we hit most of the comments. Thank you very much for joining me. And remember, don't forget your mugs, and we'll be back tomorrow night at 8 o'clock.